Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Chew on This, the podcast about all things pet nutrition. My name's Lucy and I work for Wild. Joining me is Ross Lamond, the CEO and founder of Bug Bakes and Wild Pet Food. He's spent 7 years so far working in the pet food industry, innovating new dog foods alongside experts. So I'd say it's safe to say he knows a thing or two about pet care. This week, we are looking into what is a cold pressed food and how is it made. So let's get into it.
Thanks, Lucy. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going okay, thank you. We've realised today that the dogs love watermelon. They have snuck a piece of watermelon off the side. Luckily, there was no seeds in it. So that's their new treat. How are
Have you
you?
ever tried? No, I'm good, thank you. I spent the weekend in the Cairngorms, which was good fun. It was tropical. It was like 24 degrees. So went for lots of hiking, but I came back covered in ticks. So
Oh gosh.
yeah, it's revenge from the bugs. I always wonder when I started an insect dog food company originally whether that's revenge
They
from the insect.
aggravate you? Yeah,
But yeah, no, I had a great weekend.
that's
I'm
good.
looking forward to talking about cold press. So
Mm.
this is the question we get asked all the time, what is cold pressing? So just to let you know, the very basic difference is most people do buy a dry dog food, but that's kibble. So that's those little nuggets that you see. It's what you think of as dry dog food is kibble.
Mm.
And the kibbling process is very, very high temperature. It takes quite a long time. And one of the big issues people have is that lots of nutrition can be lost when you in that manufacturing process. So it makes a very attractive looking food, and it's got good texture and it works well from a flavor point of view. But lots of people have an issue with the nutritional compromises that there can be when you make a kibble. So that's where cold press comes in. It's actually a really old technology that they used to use in agricultural industry
Mm.
because it uses as little energy and time as possible to make feedstuff for animals. So you might have actually seen them before if you go to we used to have a deer center near where I lived, and you could buy food for the deer and give it to the deer. And it's these little pellets. And it's actually the same process used to make those animal feed pellets as it is for dogs. So the reason I was first drawn to it is the first company I started, Bug Bakes. My goal was to make the most sustainable product you possibly could. So I was looking up manufacturing processes, and I found this one, cold pressing, that uses 80% less energy and also and that's because it's lower temperatures and it's less time to make the end product. But what we've discovered recently with our new brand Wild is there are millions of people that feed raw to their dog because they're concerned with the nutrition that's lost in cooked and kibbled dog food. And they're really interested if they want a dry alternative or if they decide to go back to dry food to just go with cold press instead of kibble. So I actually worked the first manufacturer we used for bug bakes. They were quite small and just getting set up. So I actually used to go and work at the cold pressing factory. So I think I'm actually probably more qualified than most other brands, even that sell cold pressed food out there, because I've actually spent weeks and weeks getting in at the factory at 6 in the morning and making all sorts of different cold pressed
Wow.
food, including our own one. Um, and it's hard work, but yeah, I know how the process goes. So essentially, it's really, really, really simple. You need to get your ingredients with cold press. When you're cold pressing food, your ingredients need to come in a dry format.
Mm.
So as long as you can basically cold press anything together as long as it's dry and in a sort of flour like material. So what's really important to me is that you find good suppliers of those dry ingredients because you could cold press anything together. So you could make a good quality cold press food or a low quality cold press food. But as long as you can get high quality ingredients in that dried form factor, you can cold press it together. So you literally just get the ingredients, and you can find them on our website or any other cold press brand. The ingredients you see, all of that will have come in the dry form factor, and it's just mixed in a giant barrel. You can add some oil to it and a little bit of water, but basically you've got to be quite careful with what um, the overall moisture content of the mix that you make before it's cold pressed can be. Otherwise, it won't work. And also, your end pellet will be too wet, and that's when you get issues like mold and things like that. Because
Mm.
ideally, you're not adding any um, preservatives or anything like that. It's a really natural product. So you want it to be completely safe and doesn't get mold and things like that, just on its own merits, not because you're adding chemicals. And the only way to do that is you've got to keep the overall moisture of the mix very low because there's almost no processing done. So what you put in the mixing bowl is essentially what you get out the other end. So yeah, you've got this huge drum, like the size of a, well, it depends on the factory, but the one we worked with was like the size of a van, basically. And you just go and you pour in all your ingredients at the right ratio.
My gosh.
And then there's a huge, it looks exactly like, if you've ever baked a cake, I don't know what you call that little, that there's a funny shaped sort of thing that spins in the,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know what you mean. I don't know the name of that.
there definitely is a name for that. I can't remember that. Well, imagine that the size of about a car that's just churning up the mixture.
Oh
And
my God.
you do that for about 10 minutes just to make sure you've got a really even distribution of all your ingredients. The last thing you do is you add the oil in at the end, and then again you leave that for a few more minutes. And then there's a long tube with a little sort of spiral in it, and the spiral's constantly spinning, and that spinning takes the ingredients from the mixing bowl and just sort of brings it up the tube.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
It's dropped into the cold pressing machine, the pelleter, and the pelleter is essentially, it looks like a giant, in fact, it looks almost identical to the inside of a washing machine or a tumble dryer. So imagine a big drum, a big metal drum with little holes in it. And those holes can be any shape you want. So usually pellets in cold pressing are sort of like you've seen them before. They're sort of like cylindrical
Yeah.
pellets.
Like
But
little tubes, aren't they?
little tubes, yeah, but you could actually make them square, or you can make them any shape you want. You would just have to replace the drum that you use. But essentially, imagine a big giant tumble dryer looking drum with the whole, like a metal drum with all the holes in it, and whatever the holes are, that's the shape that your cold press food will be. And then there's a roller that goes around really fast inside the drum. So essentially, all that happens is the ingredient mix that you've made goes up this tube, pours in the top, and the roller goes at such a speed that more the ingredients are going in the top than would naturally fall out through the holes. So the roller then is the only way it's clearing space is it's squeezing them, it's pushing them through those little holes. So that's literally the only processing that there is. It's just the moment of the pressure and force of this like flour, like almost like imagine a pancake mix texture, getting pushed through these little holes. Just literally presses it together. So it goes from a powder into quite a compact little pellet form. And during that process, it never reaches a temperature for a few seconds of higher than 40 to 50 degrees, usually 45 degrees. So it's really like a flash instant process. Squeeze through the holes, goes to about 40 degrees, and it's really exactly what you mixed in your big mixing drum. It's just that in a compressed little pellet format. So there's all I mean, it's as minimally processed as you can get.
That's so interesting because see, you hear about cold pressing and you hear, oh, it's less processed, it's lower temperatures, and there's not really much out there about how that actually works. So it's very good you've been to that factory and you did those shifts.
Yeah, I think we were talking, weren't we, Lucy, about going to like visit our factory and just do a walk around because I think people would be quite interested in this. Because yeah, I take for granted this is what I've done for the last 7 years, but actually most people that buy food don't have a clue how any of it is made. And actually, I found it really interesting. I went around and toured some of the UK's biggest kibble manufacturing sites, and because I'd come from cold pressing, I was amazed at the size of these things and just how processed the food was shocked me. I mean, there was just so many steps in the process. You'd have these huge vats of ingredients, and sometimes um, you'd have these huge silos of ingredients that would get blown like 500 or 600 meters to the next spot, and then they'd get exposed to huge temperatures until they plasticide, and they go to another chamber where they cool down. There's just so many steps. Whereas, yeah, cold pressing it's literally a case of make your mix your mix, put it in the top of the cold press, and it gets squeezed through the little
And you're done.
pellet. And yeah, you just need quite a strong motor to be able to push the roller at a great enough speed or enough power that it actually forces the ingredients together. But that's it. And then you wait for um, product to cool a bit because, as I say, it comes out at about 40 degrees, which is a little bit, and usually what average room temperature is 20, something 18, 20.
Mm.
So you can either just wait for it to cool on its own, so it takes a couple of hours to cool on its own, or sometimes the factory will have something to speed up that process, essentially just like a fan. So it'll go in this big drum, and a fan will just cool it down, and then you just go straight to bagging,
And
which is
that's
good
it.
fun. Yeah, yeah.
It's
You
done.
get a real ache in your back when you do 3 tons
I
of
bet you do.
it's good fun. And yeah, the baggers are just it's just a giant version of what you get in the kitchen. It's just this big scales, a big sort of weighted scales. You plug in what weight do you want it to be. It takes it from the big drum, weighs it out, and then you sort of it's really satisfying actually. You use your foot, there's a pedal, you press the pedal, and then it just
Nice.
6 kilograms of yeah, it's good.
Just fall down.
It does, it does. Oh, I remember I used to when I first started, you've really got to stay on top of it because it's sort of building up. So you've got to make sure you're sort of like keeping your time of like bag, next bag, bag,
Mm.
next bag. And there's no worse feeling than you didn't line up the bag with the weigher
Oh
properly.
no.
And like many kilos of stuff just spreading over the floor.
And just
It's
looking at it. Oh.
yeah, but
So is
yeah,
it
yeah.
more thinking about like kibble versus or extrusion versus cold pressing then? With there being less processing, is it more or less expensive for a brand to do cold pressing then? If there's less processing, but something in me tells me it's going to be more expensive.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the answer is it's both more expensive and less expensive.
Oh.
So actually, it is less expensive, but um, it's such a new thing for pet food. So that there are only a small handful of places that make cold pressed dog food.
Mm.
So technically, if you made a new factory that was the same size as the current, a new kibble factory that was the same size as the current cold pressing factory, that would be more expensive and more labor intensive, much more energy intensive. But kibble companies have been around for so much longer that their factories are just so big that the economy of scale is pretty impressive.
Mm.
So basically it comes out at a similar price for brands to make,
Okay.
sometimes a little more because usually you've got to work with more artisan, medium to smaller sized manufacturing places just because it's not out there. If somebody invested the same resources as is in these huge kibble factories, it would be cheaper.
Mm.
So I could see the prices coming down in the future. One thing that used to make kibble pretty cheap is the whole thing could be roboticized. So another thing that shocked me is, so as I say, I used to work at this cold press factory, and there'd be, like a team of four of us just getting on and doing it. So anywhere from 2 to 4, depending on how much food needed to be made. And I went to this big kibble manufacturing place that makes thousands of tons a month, and there's the same number of people working there. There's just, but instead of people, carrying 50 kilograms of oats and 50 kilograms of beef and all this sort of stuff,
Mm.
it was just the people there were just like sitting at a set of
They're like
controls. It looked,
are they like engineering kind of they're there if
yep,
something goes wrong.
yeah, yeah, they're there, they're going wrong, but also they process everything just with a control panel. It looked like someone driving a giant ship. It's just they're sitting in this
God.
huge control center with just numbers and widgets and buttons and stuff. So when energy was cheap, Kibble was quite efficient because it was, yeah, as I say, it was if these big companies could invest in these huge robots, it actually was quite there was quite low overheads to keep doing that. But in recent years, as everyone knows, energy prices have gone up and up and up. And that's one of the big reasons why you've seen kibble, well, both ingredient prices have gone up, but also energy's gone up so much. And kibble is so energy intensive that is a reason why kibble and dog food in general cost so much more than it used to. Whereas that hasn't that spike hasn't been as bad with cold pressed foods because the ingredients have gone up, sure, and that means the prices have gone up, but it doesn't use that much energy. So it's not been quite as bad with that. So yeah, very long-winded way of saying it could be cheaper. In an equal comparison, it is cheaper. But yeah, the kibble manufacturing places are pretty amazing at just how big they are.
That makes sense. There's so many studies out there. I can think of one from 2009 that said if you cook food, the higher temperature you cook it at, the less nutrients it's going to have at the end. And I think that's what kibble does. Whereas cold pressing, you put high quality in, you're going to get high quality out the other end. Um, And it
Yeah,
can
that's a good point. Yeah,
get what
yeah, I
you pay
think
for.
yeah, I agree. And I think it just makes our job of making the food easier because like you say, when you process the food a lot, you've got to both find reliable, high quality ingredient suppliers, and then you've got to really understand how those ingredients have been changed in your manufacturing process. And then you've got to somehow balance the food out, taking those changes and that degradation into account. How can you sort of solve that issue? So, and sometimes you do that by you've got to spray flavorings on the outside or add certain vitamins or minerals. There's quite a lot of processing you've got to do to make up for um, the downsides of that manufacturing process. Whereas it makes our job much easier because all I've got to do is find good ingredient suppliers, and that's something I've worked really hard to do. And because I've been in this industry for years, I've been able to find some really cool suppliers, local UK suppliers. And yeah, if you can find good ingredients, that's all you need to do to make a good food with cold pressing. Because you're right, it comes out exactly like it went in.
And that's the dream, really, isn't it?
But the other thing that I really like about cold press,
Mm.
I don't know exactly how many people do this, but something else that drew me to it is because the processing is so simple and it's just been taken from that sort of powder mix into those pellets. It can really easily break down, which means you can feed it like a wet food. So
Yeah,
you add
we
some
do
water, you
this.
pour some more, yeah, you add warm water to it, and you can either make a bit of a sauce because it's been so minimally processed. It just starts going back into the
It
original
literally
form.
just, yeah, it becomes a liquid again.
Yeah,
It's
it just goes.
it's so odd. I did it when we did that experiment with the different kibbles and wild pet food, put them into some glasses, initially water, then I did it with like lemon juice and different bits. And it was incredible. Like it just became this gravy almost.
Yeah,
Something that we
and
would eat.
exactly, and that also means so if your dog's got if it's lost some teeth or if it doesn't like chewing, you've got some flexibility there. And the other thing that raw feeders really like about that is it means the food starts being digested immediately when it gets into your dog's stomach. So something that's cool about raw food is it's already in its bioavailable, raw form. So as soon as it's in the stomach and it goes through into the intestines, your dog starts absorbing the nutrients. Whereas if a food takes a lot longer to be broken down, it also means it takes longer to be absorbed and the digestion um, plays out a little bit differently at different parts of the intestines. Whereas cold pressed food, as many people watching this that are raw feeders will already know, it digested at a similar rate and in a similar part of the gut that raw food does. So it means if you're mixing a dry food with raw feeding, or if you ever have to temporarily switch away from raw feeding to a dry food, cold pressed food is a really nice substitute because it digests similarly in a similar part of the gut for your dog. So yeah, you want to minimize the, the you don't want huge differences in the kinds of foods your dog is eating overnight because that can cause tummy upset and other issues. So yeah, I think there's loads and loads going for raw pressing, but I do also like that it's just so much more sustainable. I think
Yeah,
it does feel nice knowing that it's rare that you get something that's both healthier and more sustainable.
yeah.
When you find options like that, you should stick with them, I think.
Stick with them. Yeah, go with it. Yeah, 100%. Completely agree. Well, thank you very much, Ross. If you have any questions that you'd like us to look into, you can comment them down below or you can send us a message. And if you like learning about pet nutrition, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you can be the first to know when the next episode is released. Thank you for listening. See you next week.